Christianity is rather unique, being a faith that is based on historic events. This is rather unusual. If you look at all the other world religions, they tend to be essentially either abstract, philosophical, or religious kind of precepts that people are expected to follow, or their foundational stories are essentially mythological in nature. They're highly abstract. They perhaps rely on particular visions given to individuals. In the case of Islam, to Muhammad, the revelation of the Quran, or Mormonism, Joseph Smith. They tend to be things that are hard to corroborate because they are not a matter of public record. They're private visions. They're sort of things that come from the past. What's unique about Christianity is that it is a matter of public record. The events around Jesus' life, death, and resurrection were kind of publicly verifiable things. In that sense, Christianity has always been a very falsifiable religion or claim. And that's a good thing, because it's actually quite unusual to find a claim that actually you could go and look at historically and were able to ask people at the time, did this happen? Did you see this? What happened? And that's what the New Testament documents essentially are. They're a set of documents detailing the history and the stories and the claims that were made about someone called Jesus of Nazareth. And when you treat them as simply historical documents, without, regardless of what you think of their divine inspiration or anything else, I think you can come up with a really strong case that something extraordinary, different, strange happened in the first century that caused a whole set of devout Jewish people to suddenly go around claiming that Jesus was the Messiah and that he'd been raised from the dead. That's a really weird thing to start saying if you are a devout Jew. But people, for whatever, they obviously had a reason to start saying this. Now, on top of that, you've got the fact that there are all kinds of details around the resurrection story that, again, seem to be crying out for an explanation. Like the fact that the Gospels all say that women were the first people to discover the empty tomb. We kind of accept that, of course, yeah, that's what the Gospels say. In the culture, that was a very odd thing to say if you were basically trying to make up a story, because as we know, the value of women's testimony in that day and age was worth far less than that of a man. It would not have been in the interests of the gospel writers to put women as the first discoverers of the empty tomb. Why did they do that? Well, now it serves as a really positive sort of evidence for the credibility of this story. It's a phenomenon that historians call the criterion of embarrassment. I sometimes tell this story. It does not reflect well on me, but I was traveling once into London on the train to go to work. I had a mug of coffee. I didn't realize that the catch wasn't properly on the coffee. And when I tried to get off the train past a commuter next to me whose laptop was open, I managed to pour coffee all over their laptop. And it was one of those moments where I wanted the ground to swallow me up because it was so embarrassing. Now, you can assume that that story is true, because I don't tend to tell stories that embarrass me, okay? None of us like to tell stories that don't reflect well on ourselves. We tend to tell stories that kind of are good, reflect well on ourselves, we'll embellish them. Why would the gospel writers what possible reason could they have had to invent this idea that women were the first discoverers of the empty tomb? That was not good for their credibility back then. Now it gives us a good reason to believe they really were telling the truth. There was an empty tomb. Women did discover it. Those kinds of details, they're small details, but you put lots of those things together and you see basically what I would describe as a resurrection-shaped hole at the center of the Christian story. And I just haven't found a better explanation than the one the first disciples gave, which was that Jesus had risen from the dead. So I just think there is a good historical case to be made. And then you look at the world around us. This is not such a strong historical argument, but I do find that this story, of all stories, has shaped the world like no other story. There's got to be something in that as well, I think, that this movement that began with just 12 people, it's now shaped the world. There's something to it. I don't think you can simply dismiss that.